All right, let's get right into it. CUET PG. The pressure's on, I know. And I know Chapter 5, Comparative Literature and Translation, feels like this giant mountain you have to climb. But guess what? Today, we're going to crack it wide open.
Yeah, does this look familiar? I bet your head is swimming with all these terms right now. Influence, reception, intertextuality, equivalence, adaptation. It just feels like this totally random list of words you're supposed to memorize, right? And yeah, it's overwhelming.
And you know what? That leads to the single biggest mistake I see students make. They try to brute force it. They try to memorize every single one of these terms in isolation. Let me tell you, that is a losing battle, and it is absolutely not how you're going to score those top marks.
But what if there's a smarter way? What if I told you that all these confusing terms, they're not random at all? What if they're all connected by one simple, powerful framework that just makes everything click? You got to stick with me here, because that's exactly what we're going to uncover.
Okay, so to unlock that framework, we've got to start with the core mission. We need to zoom out a bit and really see the bigger picture. What is comparative literature really all about?
Think about it like this. When you study a single literature, say English Lit, it's kind of like examining one huge, magnificent tree. You're looking at its bark, its leaves, its roots, all the details. But comparative literature, that's when you step back and see the entire forest. It's about understanding how all the trees connect, how they talk to each other, and how they influence one another.
And that's really what the official definition is getting at. It's the study of literature across boundaries. We're not just looking at books in a little bubble, no way. We're looking for the conversations happening between cultures, between languages. We're basically literary detectives on a global case.
And hey, this is not some new idea. Way back in the 19th century, the great writer Goethe, he called this Welt literature, world literature. He just got it. He knew that great stories belong to everyone and that literature is just one giant global conversation.
So, okay, if literature is this big global conversation, how do we even begin to analyze it, right? Well, this is where our framework comes in. I want you to think of this as your personal detective toolkit, and it's built around 3 simple, powerful questions.
This is it. This is the whole thing. Every single complex theory from this chapter fits neatly under these 3 questions. Question 1, how do texts travel? Question 2, how do they talk to each other? And question 3, how are they heard? Just remember, travel, talk, heard. That's the entire framework. So let's break it down.
All right, so first up, how do texts travel across borders? Well, we're basically looking at 2 main pathways here. The first is what we call an influence study. That's where you trace the direct, provable impact of one author or one book on another. And the second pathway, translation. It's the literal vehicle, right? The car that carries a story from one language into another.
Okay, let's do a quick pause and think right here. I want you to actually consider this. When you read a book that's been translated, are you really reading the original author's work? Or is it something new, something kind of co-created by the translator? It's a pretty deep question, and it gets right to the heart of what we're talking about. Okay, let's move on to our second big question. How do texts talk to each other? Now, the most obvious way is through something called intertextuality. Think of it like this big, complex spiderweb of quotes, references, and echoes between books. But here's what's really interesting, the typological approach. This is when we find similar patterns, like, say, the tragic hero, in books from cultures that had absolutely no direct contact.
All right, pop quiz, mini quiz time. Let's say you're doing a study comparing the tragic hero in ancient Greek drama and in classical Japanese drama. These 2 cultures had no contact. Is that an example of A, influence study, or B, typological approach? You got it? If you said B, typological approach, you absolutely nailed it. It's all about those parallel patterns, not direct influence.
And that brings us to our final question. How are texts heard? This is where we get into reception study. Now, the big idea here is that a book's meaning, it isn't set in stone by the author, not at all. It's really about how different audiences, in different times and different places, receive and interpret that work. So you, the reader, you play a huge part in actually creating the meaning.
Okay, quick attention reset. Let's shift gears and zoom right in on translation for a minute, because every single translator faces this fundamental, really high-stakes problem. I like to call it the translator's dilemma.
And this right here perfectly illustrates that chord tension. It's this constant push and pull, this battle between two things. On one side, you've got fidelity, being totally faithful to the original author's every word, every nuance. And on the other side, you've got readability, making sure the new text actually makes sense and feels natural to a whole new audience.
So how do they solve this dilemma? Well, the first tool in their toolkit is equivalence. But it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. You have formal equivalence. That's your super strict word-for-word translation. And then you have dynamic equivalence, which is all about recreating the original effect or the feeling for the new reader.
Okay, another quick pause and think. Let's say you had to translate the phrase, "It's raining cats and dogs," into another language. How would you translate the feeling, not just the words? I mean, you wouldn't translate it literally, right? That would be crazy. You'd find a local phrase that means it's raining really, really hard. And that, my friends, is dynamic equivalence in action.
But sometimes, even that isn't enough. And that's when translators have to pull out the bigger tools: adaptation or even appropriation. Think of it like this. Adaptation just tweaks the story to make it fit. Maybe you change a food reference that wouldn't make sense. But appropriation, that transplants the entire story, replanting it in a totally new cultural setting. Okay, deep breath. We've covered a lot of ground. And I know what you're probably thinking. This is great, but how does this actually help me crack my exam? So let's get to the crucial part. Let's bring all this together and turn it into a winning CUET strategy.
Hey, remember that simple framework I promised you at the very beginning? Well, it's time to close the loop. All those scary-sounding terms, influence, intertextuality, reception, equivalence, adaptation, they are not random. They are just the specific tools we use to answer our three big questions, or to solve the translator's dilemma. That's it. That's the whole secret.
And here it is, your CUET mental cheat sheet. Seriously, screenshot this right now. When you get a question in the exam, don't panic. Just decode it. If the question is asking about the impact of author X on author Y, ding, 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 that's influence study, which is all about how texts travel. If you see a question about a recurring pattern or archetype, that's the typological approach, which is about how texts talk. A question about a book's popularity in another country, that's reception study, how texts are heard. And if it's about translating an idiom or a tricky phrase, that's the translator's dilemma. See? It's that simple.
So let's do a super quick lightning recap. Number 1, don't just memorize, understand the framework. Number 2, Complet just ask 3 questions. How do texts travel, talk, and how are they heard? 3, translation is always that balancing act between fidelity and readability. And finally, number 4, use this framework, use it to decode any question the exam throws at you.
So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. Is a translated book a perfect mirror of the original, or is it more like an entirely new painting, just inspired by the first one? There's no single right answer, so just chew on that for a bit. Hey, be sure to check out our other explainers to keep your prep game strong. And seriously, best of luck on the exam. You've got this.